I'm Julie Bullitt. I've been a family therapist for over 30 years.
I'm David Bullitt. I've been a divorce and family lawyer for more than 35 years.
Together, we have been married for more than 37 years.
In our professional practices, the two of us have been witnesses to individuals and families struggling with life's most difficult challenges. In this podcast, we will talk about the conversations we have had,
The conversations we should have had.
and those that every relationship needs to have in order to find success, happiness, and fulfillment.
This is Conversations for Couples,
The podcast. Well, hello, folks. Welcome back to Conversations for Couples.
the podcast.
Today, if anyone out there has read our first book, you will know that one of the main sources of conflict in a relationship that we think, and I think it's been proven out, is money. That's one of the main areas that people fight about, that they bump heads about and have difficulties with. And today, we're very fortunate to have someone here who might be able to help folks maybe not avoid those problems, but navigate them in a little bit better way. We have Corey Nichols, who's a financial coach and planner, the founder and CEO of Yes Life Financial, a boutique wealth management firm in Richmond, Virginia. Welcome, Corey.
Thank you. Absolutely. So excited to be here.
Yeah,
I hope I can provide the insights and the answers as well.
Well, we do too, because we're taking notes. We've got like $19 in the bank, and we want to make sure we do what we do with it. So,
Well, the one thing that I'm most...
having $19 builds character.
There you go. You're not kidding about that, and coupons too. So one of the things that I'm super excited about is we've talked to some people, like money people. Generally, they're a little dry and boring, and I feel like you kind of bring a little bit of fun and personality to the money discussion. So I'm looking forward to kind of shining the light on you and absorbing some information, but not in a dry way.
yeah, and so what I would like you to do, Corey, because you have a very interesting background in terms of getting where you are, tell the folks, your path to this Yes Life Financial and how it differs maybe from what other folks in your industry do.
Yeah, I think the difference with just what we do is so much more focused on the fact that I want to prioritize the idea of actually executing on your finances as opposed to just theory of finances, right? I think it's really boring to just have a conversation and say this is how a Roth IRA works and this is why Roth IRA is better. Instead, let's have a conversation about how do people become better savers? Yeah. I mean, if all it was that was an issue for people from a financial perspective was a lack of knowledge, then we'd all be really good at finances because there's a ton of information out there, right? The part that's challenging about your finances is that you're a human, and it's the human aspect that we have to resolve. And so how do you take an individual, right, identify where their strengths are financially and where their weaknesses are, and say, hey, great, keep doing the strengths, right? On the weaknesses side, here's how we minimize the damages, right? So that's really that difference that I like to prioritize. And I think maybe that's a little bit of what you're talking about as well. As far as my path to get here, I was just telling somebody the other day, it is so much more fun to look at your path in the rearview mirror than it is to live through it, right? To look back and go look how far we've come is so much more fun than just the actual experience. So, I've got an MBA. I graduated from college in 2008, was not an ideal time, especially in the finance space. Got an MBA, finished that in 2010, went and worked in corporate America. And spent 6 or 8 years in a corporate finance role. And I always tell people I'm a terrible employee. I think that when you hire somebody, you should hire them to do a job, and you should trust them, and you should listen to them, and you should really give them the power and the authority to make decisions. That wasn't my experience in corporate America. And so outspoken Cory said, this is how we should do things. This is what should be different. And when you work for a small business and you're outspoken, if the owner doesn't like it, then you better either, stop.
You're just out, not outspoken.
Yeah, you better find something else to do. And so he ran out of patience and said, Cory, we don't need you here anymore. And in 2016, I was fired from that job. And my wife at the time was pregnant with our second child. I was the only income earner. So it was a terrifying time, And I'd always had a passion for personal finance. And so it kind of was just, I'd always said I want to start a business. I want to start a business. But it is really hard to walk away from a 6-figure salary and corporate cars and just benefits and all that stuff. So when it was taken away from us, it was like, all right, well, maybe this is the sign, let's go for it, and we certainly didn't have, immediate success. It was, kind of what everybody from an entrepreneurial perspective will tell you. It was, 4 or 5 years of just trudging through mud and taking on debt and, late nights of going, are we the dumbest human beings on the face of the earth? And eventually you go like, oh, it worked out. Right. And what people say once it's worked out is they go like, oh, it was easy for you, or, oh, like, you got lucky, or, whatever it is. Right. And, they also weren't the people who were doing those late nights of saying, what the hell are we doing?
Right.
You take a lot of risk and you hope it pays off. And unfortunately, sometimes it doesn't pay off.
Yeah.
So at your firm, and I've looked at your website, and I've listened to a lot of your stuff on Instagram and so forth. I'm going to ask you about a couple of those
Okay.
interesting posts. But how are clients, and without digging down into the financial stuff just yet,
Sure.
how are clients handled or managed or treated differently at your firm than they might be if they walked into, Merrill Lynch or UBS or wherever?
Yeah, so I think the first thing is just that our focus is not on the investments, right? Like that is where we make money, right? And so we're always really transparent to the fact that we charge fees, and this is what the fees are, and this is how we make money. But at the end of the day, it's probably the thing we talk about the least. I tell everybody the first time I meet with a client, it's an hour meeting. The first 30 minutes is just going through and understanding how they operate today financially. And that means which account gets your direct deposit, and where do you pay bills out of, and do you put money in savings, and what's the system that you have in place to do that, and how do you think about budgeting? Do you, just understanding how they operate. And then once we figure that out, then we go, all right, great, here's the things I want you to start to think about. And I think that most financial advisors, they ask the questions of how much is in this account, how much is in this account, how much is over there, what's your income. They want to know the numbers, right? But they don't want to know the logistics of how it all operates.
Right.
And I think the logistics is where you figure out where people are, not doing it. I mean, case in point, I'll talk to somebody and they'll have, let's say they have $30,000 in a checking account.
Yep.
A financial advisor just right, $30,000 checking, and then they move on, right? They don't really care. That's not enough that they're going to invest the money, whatever. The first thing I go is, that's way too much money in a checking account. You lose your debit card one time, you're going to have a heck of a mess trying to get that money all cleaned up. Let's get you used to having $3,000, $4,000, $5,000, whatever you need for living expenses for the month in your checking account. And then the rest of it, let's get it into a savings account at least, right? Somewhere where you're not using the account online, bill pays, debit cards, just for security purposes, right? Yeah. So those kind of little things that we end up focusing on, as opposed to just saying, hey, here's the funds we're going to use and the types of accounts we're going to use.
Yeah. So kind of expanding, what we're talking about to couples, because I really think that, if you have maybe an individual person, your work might be a little bit easier. What do you do? How do you handle when a couple comes in, and maybe a couple that has, two different ideas about money?
Yeah. So the first thing I'll say here, and this is maybe a little bit of a surprise, and it certainly differentiates me from most financial advisors, I focus a lot of my marketing on trying to be appealing to women. And my philosophy is just that if you look at aggregate data about women versus men, women are more inclined to ask for directions or instructions, right? They're also more inclined to make solid financial decisions, meaning they're not emotional as much. I know they have a stereotype of being emotional, but they don't change their path regularly, right? They kind of say, hey, I'm going to choose this path. I'm going to go down it, right? And maybe if they make a bad decision, that's a bad thing. But, at least the women that I have had in my life have made pretty solid decisions. And so as a result, it's really beneficial. So the first thing is prioritizing having women be kind of the leader in that, right? So a lot of times when I have a conversation with a couple, the female is the lead in that dynamic, right? So when I start that first phone call and I say, what made you schedule time today?
Yeah.
Right? Because I'm not the financial advisor picking up the phone going, let's schedule some time. I want to sell you something, right? It's all incoming to me. So the first thing is, what made you schedule time? And the biggest thing that I do is, as soon as whoever's in the lead, a lot of times it's the woman, finishes, I will say, hey, John, do you have anything to add to that? Right? Because I think oftentimes it's really easy to get one side of the dialogue, right? This is what Kim thinks is important in our finances in our household, right?
Well,
Well,
yeah,
we are a household. So, hey, John, what do you want to
Yeah.
contribute? Right? Like,
Yeah.
let's get the other partner's perspective. Maybe they say, yeah, I agree with everything that Kim said, but also this.
Mm-hmm.
a
Yeah.
lot of times in my office, Corey, is interesting is that I see people have no sense of what their financial circumstance is. And they may have been married for 25 or 30 years. They know they go to the grocery store with their American Express card. They pay for this with their card. They never see bills, never pay attention to bills. So is part of the process when you're working with folks an educational one in terms of, where do you want to go, or tell us a little bit about how that
Yeah,
works.
I think the education aspect though is so ongoing, and I think it's important to set expectations with individuals, right? And one of the expectations that I set is I'm always going to explain to you what my recommendation is.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, that does not mean that I expect you to remember it next time we talk. You're fully entitled to ask me again, why are we doing this?
Yeah.
Right? Like, I've got a client who does, pharmaceuticals. Well, I'm not an expert in pharmaceuticals. And even though my pharmacist will answer a question, next time I've got to take, Mucinex and Tylenol at the same time, I'm thinking to myself, is there an interaction here that I shouldn't be taking this?
Mm-hmm.
Because I'm just not an expert at it, right? So same thing is when I have that conversation, I
Mm-hmm.
expect them to go, yeah, I know we did this last time we spoke.
Yeah.
Can you just reaffirm why we're doing that?
Yeah. Well, something that's interesting as you were talking, which is that, like women are classically more able to ask for help, guidance, like directions, the old, kind of like a man will drive around lost for a while and a woman will roll
Yes.
down their window or go to the gas station and ask for help. And in David and I's relationship, we shared with you before in our initial phone call, we had some financial issues, and I would say that it was really me that drove it instigated the really looking into our finances and digging deep and making a plan, and sort of like I call it coming to Jesus, like
Yeah.
putting all the bills out there. And luckily he was, willing, and, he didn't give me a hard time, but I really did initiate it. And then he was a great partner and we worked together. And I would say we wouldn't have asked for what happened in terms of, being financially in a bad way. And I'm wondering how you feel it's sort of helped your relationship, or what it did for your relationship.
Yeah, my personal relationship, there is a lot of trust there from my wife on me to manage the finances, right? It's not an interest of hers. It's not something that she feels super knowledgeable about. She knows it's my specialty. And so her preference in life is I don't want to deal with it if I don't have to. I want you to
Right.
take care of it. And so there's a lot of trust there, right? So part of that process is when you're going through the thick of it, right? And you're the person who's supposed to be the one who's figuring it all out, right? And the numbers don't look good, is having that honest dialogue to say like, hey,
Yes.
this is my responsibility, right?
Yes.
Here's where we are. And I think the hardest part about that is even now, like today, like we're in a good place financially, but I'll say to her like, hey, we need business to pick up, right? Like business is down 10%. We need it back up, right? And I think it's easier for me because I can just say, hey, purely analytical, here's what the numbers say. I think it's harder for her because it's like, is this my husband telling me I'm not working hard enough? Is this my husband telling me that I need to spend less money? Is this my husband?
Right.
And in reality, it's really, and you guys probably can relate to this. It's really your business partner telling you that we need to. I mean, it's not me coming to her as her husband and saying, "Hey, you got to earn more money," or "Hey, you got to spend less money." Like that's not the case at all. It's just a business partner saying, "Hey, here's what it is." And so I think that's really difficult for us. But I mean, we always say to each other, like, I mean, we love each other immensely, right? But even more than that, there is nobody else in this world, I am confident of it, that could tolerate me and that I could tolerate to the extent that we do it with each other, especially with how, raising 3 kids together, being married, having a, personal relationship, having a business relationship. I mean, there's a lot of togetherness, right? And it requires, good, healthy dialogue. And when people say like, how do you do it? My argument is, or my thing is, we argue really well. I think we're not afraid to say the thing that is on our mind. We're aware of the fact that it's a safe space. And so our preference is if there's something kind of in the air, let's get it on the table as quickly as possible. Let's address it. And then we can find a way to move forward.
So how do you take that Right. And now you move what you do at home and you move it back into your office, and you've got a couple in front of you that are sitting down for the first or second or third time, whatever it may be, who have very different perspectives in terms of saving. Maybe you have someone who might be a little bit more sophisticated, who has different views in terms of how to allocate resources. But in any event, there's some conflict between these two folks. And what's your strategy in terms of trying to help them find the right path or a compromise?
Yeah, so for me, I try to use my own personal experience a lot of times, right? I think people often want to know whether or not you have credibility if you've kind of
Yes.
walked a mile in their shoes, so to say,
Mm-hmm.
right? And so sometimes you've walked a mile in their shoe, and so you can say, here's my own personal
Yeah.
experience, here's how we got through it, right? You can find some relief in that. And part of that, by the way, this is the really important part, is saying it is so much easier for me to say this because I'm on the other side,
Yeah.
right? So I don't want this to come across as, you got this, stop being negative, stop being stressed. No. Like, your stress is totally justified. Your anxieties are normal, like, all of those things. But here's the steps in the process to get to the other side. I've been through it. We can get through this together as well. The other side of that is when somebody says something to you and you never have been through it, right? I can either draw on other experiences I've had with other clients and what other clients have shared with me, right? Or, and I think this is a really important one, I can say, this is uncharted territory for me, but we can figure this out together.
Yeah.
I just don't think we say it in general enough in society today. I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And if there's one thing that I'm confident about as a business owner and somebody who's done this for 7-8 years, there are a lot of things in this world that I don't know the answer to, right?
Yes.
But I'm highly confident in my ability to find the answer.
Yeah.
And so if I just say to somebody, I don't know, but we'll figure this out, they're a lot happier with that than me just blurting out some BS answer that they find out later wasn't factual.
Yeah. So one of the things that we do as a couple, and we also sort of, talk about this a lot, try to get people to do this, which is goal setting. So how important do you feel that is around the finance piece? And how do you see that, sort of, what does it look like?
Yeah. So on the finance piece in particular, I think it's bigger to it's got to be really long-term. Like, I really want people to zoom out, so it can be really difficult to have financial goals that are very short-term. And the reason is there's just too many variables involved. And so a lot of times it becomes, oh, this is the thing that went awry that threw the goal off. Instead, what I encourage people to do is, if you zoom out and you think about your life together in really big terms, right? What are the priorities? And then can you pass every decision you make through the lens of, does it feed that ultimate goal, right? So for example, like, I am not a, live to work person. I am a work to live person, very much so. I was a person who had my entire identity as a human being tied up in a job that I then got fired from and had to kind of refigure out who I was as a person. And so part of that process was, hey, look, who I am is a lot more about the relationships I have, the good that I can try to contribute to the world, the father that I am to my kids, the partner that I am to my wife. Like, those are much more important. And so for us, we know that we say to ourselves, we want to do what we want, when we want, with the people that we want to do it with. And so oftentimes when you get asked a question that says, hey, do you want to do this? Or, hey, we want to make this change in business, you can go back to this lens and say, well, does it get you closer to this idea, right? I mean, my business is named Yes Life Financial because I wanted to say yes to the life that I wanted to live more often, right? Like, that was the whole.
I love
and
that.
even my dad now is on board, right? And he was a 35-year corporate guy, worked for the same company. Just stock it away in your 401k and you can enjoy life when you get to retirement. That was like his mentality, right?
Yeah.
And even he now, if I tell him that, my wife and I are thinking about doing something, he'll go, Corey, is that a yes life decision? Like, I mean, he's on board, right? Like, you got to pass it through that filter. So when it comes to couples, zoom out and really think about what do we want our life to look like?
Yeah. Yeah. And I think, as a couple, sort of, things change. Like, when you're young, you're just kind of making it through, and then you start having kids and you just want to provide them with, the things that they need. And then, as you get older, say for retirement, hopefully, we're at an interesting point where we keep on having the questions around, is this a good financial decision, but is this a good lifestyle decision? And we're battling between, those two quite often. if we should do something or we should not do something. I mean, financially it makes sense to keep on doing one thing, but it would be a lot more fun to do something else. So what kind of advice do you give?
I'm living in this over the course of the past 4 or 5 days, so this is very relevant to me on a personal level right now. I think, this is where you talk to people about their finances all the time. I mean, quite frankly, if I said to a client, the only thing I'm going to help you with is managing your 401k or your IRA and the investments, they wouldn't want to or need to talk to me any more frequently than once every 5 years.
Right.
Like, there's just not that much going on, right? But instead what happens is they say, hey, we want to buy a house, or hey, we want to move, right? And people just want validation that what they're thinking is not crazy, right? So I can't tell you how often people just go like, hey, this is what we're thinking about doing, right? Are we crazy or are we not crazy? I was on a golf trip this past weekend. I'm with a friend. He's not a client of mine. He's just a friend of mine. And he says to me in the car, like, what do you personally do when it comes to college savings? Because he does something for college savings and he just wants validation about whether his strategy is, and so that's all he's looking for. I've got a friend who's going to call me at 11 o'clock today. Again, not a client, just a friend of mine. Our kids go to school together. He and his wife want to buy a new car. Are we crazy to think like this, right? Like, people just want that validation.
Yeah. And it's interesting. So we had this very same discussion with a fellow that we've been working with for a few years now, because I have this, and by the way, we're coming your way towards your direction Saturday to look at something, but I have this desire at my age now that I can work remotely anywhere to just be able to hop in my truck, or in this particular case, hop in a conversion van, a little RV, and just take off. And so as part of our discussion with the fellow that we work with, Julie immediately says, now that's not a good investment, right? And he said exactly what you said. Well, there's two kinds of investments. There's a financial investment. There's a life investment. But the discussion that we had with him is very much sounds like what you would have had with us, which is, all right, well, let's see if this is a lifestyle thing, let's see if we can figure it out so that it makes sense. And and I really like that approach a lot in our discussion with him. And I want to go back in the retrospectoscope is what medical malpractice lawyers call it, and reel back, because something I saw on your Instagram page was very interesting to me when you were talking about working with young couples and this rule of 72. So tell the folks, and we do have, interestingly enough, for two people with grandchildren, we do have a fair number of younger couples who listen to this. And as a couple, Julie and I did a terrible job when we first were married, in the first probably 15 to 20 years of our marriage, of worrying too much about saving. And had I seen your video then, might have been in a different position. But I'd like you to talk to folks a little bit about that, about new couples, about this rule of 72.
Yeah, so the rule of 72, by the way, just for anybody who doesn't know, is just you take 72, you divide it by your rate of return. So let's say you're going to get 10% per year. 72 divided by 10 is 7. Your money will double every 7 years. So it's a way of figuring out really quickly how quickly your money will double. The challenge, this goes back to the psychology of money, right? Is when we as people want these like metrics to validate whether we're on pace or not. And so what we do is we go to like whatever U.S. News and World Report that they put out that said you should have at this age 1x your salary, this age 5x your salary, whatever that is, right? Which is a terrible metric because it's oversimplified where you are in life. Okay. But the other side of that is the reason we want validation is because retirement is this goal that's so far off in the future that I can't wait until it's a priority to start funding it. Instead, I kind of have to chip away at it my entire adult life, right? And what happens is when you meet somebody and they're 25 or 30 and they've been chipping away and they're reading that article that says they need, $2 million at age 65 and they've got $100,000 in their 401k, they're like, I'm never getting there. I've been at this for 8 years and I've got 5% of the way there. It's never going to happen. That's where they are psychologically. And the reason is because what they've done so far is they've had time. So they've contributed, let's say 10 years worth of contributions, right? But they haven't had the other side of that, which is the 10 years of contributions growing over the next 30 years, right? And so that rule of 72 oftentimes gives people some validation that, look, no more contributions. If we, in theory, stop today, which we're not going to do, the $100,000 that you have right now at age 30, right, becomes 200,000 at 37, becomes 400,000 at 44, becomes 800,000 at 51, and becomes 1.6 million at 58, right? So all of a sudden you take this rule of 72 and you are able to kind of fast forward people in a very simple way that helps them understand that this $100,000 that I saved so far, right, is worth significantly more when I fast forward 40 years in the future, right?
That's interesting.
And the crazy part is, if you just say to people like, hey, let's just assume for a minute that you get a 10% return every year, just so we can make this math easy and simple. If you have $100,000 in your account and you get a 10% return, you got $10,000. And nobody's turning their nose up at $10,000, but they do think if I just earn $10,000 a year, I can do some pretty quick math. I'm never getting to 1.8 million, right? But what they don't understand is, okay, well, that day comes that you've got $1 million in that account. Now that 10% was $100,000. I mean, for most individuals, all we're really trying to do when they're young is get them to understand that there is a time in your future where the growth on your account exceeds your contributions to the account. That's not the early days of your retirement. The first, your first year of work, you're earning $50,000 and you're contributing 10%. All right, you're putting $5,000 in there. You're lucky if you had $500 of growth on the $5,000 you contributed, right? You're like, I just don't see that snowball going yet.
Yeah.
Right. And so that rule of 72 kind of demonstrates that snowball effect.
Yeah. And when I first heard the rule of 72, I was thinking that you were asking people to wait 72 hours to like impulsively buy something or, buy a house or get those boots or leather jacket, like 72, which is not a bad strategy. Also, sort of for people that have spending issues that might be sitting across from you right now. We like stuff. We like leather jackets. We like boots. We like, we like to buy stuff. So
even
very
more
often
so than the 72-hour rule, sorry to cut you off, is I just tell people remove your credit cards and debit cards from Apple Pay in your Amazon account in the pre-bill. There is, have you ever heard of Mel Robbins, the 5-second rule?
I love her. Yes.
So, Mel Robbins, and she says, right, like that 5-second rule says you have 5 seconds to make a decision before your head starts to justify things. So if you want to get up in the morning at, let's say, 5 a.m., right, when the alarm goes off, you got to go 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, like a rocket ship, hop out of bed. Otherwise, you're like, you know what, I can work out in the afternoon.
Yep.
Right? The exact same thing is true in your finances, except for it works in the opposite order.
Yes.
Right? So if you pull the trigger and you don't wait 5 seconds, right, your brain is telling you this is a totally fine purchase.
Right.
If you wait the 5 seconds, you go like, should I spend the $100 here or should I spend it somewhere else? And having that credit card saved into, your Amazon or into Apple Pay makes it that you can make a purchase in today's society in less than 5 seconds before you've even had the ability to process.
Yeah.
Right.
That's a really good point.
I can't tell you how many times, because I don't store cards in my things for this reason. There's been something that I find online and I'm like, I want to buy this, but my credit card is across the living room in our little caddy. And I go, I don't really want to get up to walk across the room. I mean, I want that thing so little that I won't walk 20 feet to grab my credit card. Right. And when
that's
it's saved,
really interesting.
I spent the 20, 50, whatever dollars on a piece of garbage that I wasn't willing to walk across the living room for.
Yeah. So, I'm going to go I'm going to go remove my credit card from my from my saved cards.
You're probably not going to do that, but
I need to. One of the things I do is I put things in the cart and I usually sit on it for 24. If I still want it, I'll get it after that. But unless there's a good sale that's like going to be up in 24, then I get it right away.
I'm so glad we didn't talk last week before Prime Day. I would have been on the hot.
Oh yeah. So anyway, but this is great. So just one last question. So David and I went through our own financial issues and we feel that it actually helped create a stronger bond because we had a purpose. We had a plan. We had to work really hard at something.
Yeah.
Do you see that with couples that you work with and also, for your own relationship? Like, do you and your wife think that you're stronger because you went through something hard?
Yeah, there's no doubt that pressure makes diamonds. And I think the pressure of our relationship and what we went through certainly helped us, develop more of a bond and, perspective in life and all that kind of stuff. Right. But I also think that when it comes to finances, in relationships, one of the biggest things is just being, compassionate about the fact that your partner has a different experience.
Right.
And that comes down to, I prioritize golf. My wife doesn't value golf. I want her to understand my golf spending the same way she wants me to understand her health and wellness spending, or her, manicure, pedicure spending, or whatever it is. Right. And so having the compassion to understand that, hey, what I value with my dollars might be slightly different from yours on the day-to-day stuff. Hopefully on the big picture stuff, you've got the same vision. Right. And that also goes to, you can have very different human experiences. Right. I mean, growing up, I was, there was a healthy size silver spoon in my life. I didn't really have a lot of financial adversity or any financial adversity growing up. That is not the same for my wife. Right. And so it is unreasonable for me to expect that she, views money the same way that I view money, because it was never a concern for me and it was for her. And so I have to be, accepting of the fact that her human experience financially has been different than mine.
I both of the things that you just touched on are so important, which the first one was perspective taking, which in relationships goes a long way, being able to do that. And the second one is understanding that we all come from different places. Even if we were raised relatively similarly, your concept of money, the way your family handles money, what money means to you is absolutely different than your partner. And understanding and embracing that is so important, and working through the sticking points.
Yeah. I mean, we both were raised in households, our parents were married. It was very loving households, very supportive, all those things. Doesn't change the fact that for one of us, finances was an occasional, at least, concern or anxiety. And for the other one, it wasn't. Right. So it's like, we still have very similar values and morals and that kind of stuff. But the money, the financial experience is still different.
You come to the table with different, having played different games, different card games, and it's true when it comes to money. It's true when it comes, as Julie said, to other areas of a relationship. But this has just been really terrific, Corey. I really appreciate you coming on. I think that the information that you've offered today is incredibly valuable to folks. And because most people do have challenges in their relationship when it comes to money. Even those who both came to the table with the silver spoon, often they also have challenges and questions and conflicts. So if folks who are listening want to try to get hold of you and talk with you a little bit, maybe try to become a client, what's the best way for them to do that? And folks out there, we're going to include all this information in the show notes as well. But Corey, if you would, let them know.
Yeah, so they can certainly follow on Instagram. That's where I'm the most active, at Cory. That's CORY _Nichols, NICHOLS. You'll find it, because if you type in Corey Nichols, the financial coach guy, like it'll be there. I don't think there's anybody else finance related with the name. And then my website's yeslife.financial. So awesome. A little bit confusing because it's not .com, but you just type in yeslife.financial. It'll take you right there. And awesome. Feel free to send me a DM, an email, whatever it is, and we'll get you some guidance and answers.
Yeah. Perfect. One more thing I did notice, that you value your spending also in the world of bourbon. Yes, I saw you had a bottle of Eagle Rare, which is a particular favorite of mine.
And Julie, I might have a bourbon problem. Not consumption. I shouldn't say that. That's there's too much brown liquor in my house. Let's just say that.
There's no such thing as too much brown liquor.
Yeah. That's built into my budget as well, as picking up a bottle or two here and there. But again, thanks so much, folks. We are the Bullitts, TheBullitts. This is Conversations for Couples,
the podcast.
And you can find us on all social media platforms at the Bullitts. I'm not even going to go through them all. Instagram, Facebook, Pinterest, I come to find out, TikTok, and we have a YouTube channel where this video will also be posted. Thanks again, Corey, and everyone. We will see you and hear from you next time.
Thanks.
Julie Bullitt is a professionally licensed clinical social worker and family therapist. David Bullitt is a divorce and family lawyer. Julie is not your therapist, and David is not your lawyer. This podcast is meant for educational and entertainment purposes only.